Hello, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I had a moment of difficulty in finding my notes. Okay, so I'm Ruth Paserman. I'm the Director for Investment and in particular the European Social Fund in the European Commission. And we are going to have this session focusing on how the European Social Fund Plus, which is the new program starting in 2021, can support social innovation. Perhaps I will start by giving you a short introduction, and then we have very interesting speakers with whom we will have a dialogue. We have Filipe Almeida, who is going to talk about the experience of Portugal's social innovation, and then we're going to have Norbert Kunz, who is going to talk about his experience on the National Competence Centers for Social Innovation in Germany. So, but to start off, let me explain a minute. Perhaps, as you know, the European Social Fund is the main instrument for investing in people from the European Commission. What we have, we have the fund. The money is organized in 7-year periods. So we had 2014, 2020, and now we're starting the 2021-2027 programming. In this new programming, the social fund has about 100 billion, and this money is mostly spent at the level of the member states. I mean, 99%, and within the new framework, it is possible for member states to spend this money on social innovation. There is no minimum percentage that they have to spend, but there is an incentive of a higher level of co-financing from the European level. If I may perhaps illustrate now why we think this is important. We have already in the previous 2014-2020 period invested in social innovation at the European level. Both it has happened at the level of the national programs, in some cases with a specific axis, and in some cases as a secondary objective, let's say for the member states, with an overall budget of 3.7 billion. Of course, it is the more the economy and the society is moving very fast. We are having lots of changes. Now we're in a phase of a lot of changes. We wanted to push for a green, digital, and just transition. Then we had COVID, and all these things have been transforming the way we work, the way we live, the way we interact with each other, and therefore also the way we need to provide for the most vulnerable, but also we need to help people participate in society. All of this requires new solutions, a new way of organizing and delivering services. And we certainly have seen this year how we need to be innovative. And that is why we have been pushing to invest in social innovation already for some time. As I said, we have already done it in the period 2014-2020, but we will do it even more in the period 21-27. And I want to just show you quickly how we plan to do this. I don't know if Laura can put on a slide. Basically, we are going to support both the initial phase of really social experimentation for projects, and this can be done both at national level through the ESF, as I said before, by an incentive of a higher level of co-financing, and through also for EU value-added projects, let's say, that would be multinational, which would be financed directly from the EU, where the pot is much smaller. It's not. It's at the 1%, the extra 1%. Yes. But we will also be able to finance transnational cooperation at EU level. So that's perhaps the second step is not at the grassroots innovation level, but it is at the level of scaling up and seeing if there is, if there are other countries which are interested in piloting a project which perhaps was initiated somewhere else. And of course, the final objective would be to be able to mainstream some of the most successful innovations, and that could be financed via the mainstream ESF plus. This chain will be supported by also, as I said, the funding, but we're also proposing instruments. So there will be a social innovation database, which allows for example, for searching partners and also inspiration to see what other projects are being done. We will also have competence centers on social innovation, which allows the knowledge sharing, if you want, of capacity building networks, etc. And then we will also have both national contact points of the EASY program. So basically the part that is financed by the direct management directly by the EU. There will be nonetheless be national contact points, and then there will also be national competence centers, which again through the ESF, which will allow the exchange of information and the ability to replicate. So this is the structure through which we propose to support social innovation in the next programming period. And but now perhaps we could move to looking at what the learning experience have been of the previous period, 2014 to 2020. And as I mentioned before, we have two excellent speakers to discuss that with. And I'm going to start inviting Filipe Almeida. Hello, Filipe. So Filipe is responsible for Portugal social innovation, and Portugal social innovation has been is really an emblematic example of how we could give social innovation a high priority in attributing ESF funding at the national level. So Filipe is the president of Social Innovation Portugal, and I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you and to understand what you did. How what was the main idea behind?
Yes. So hello, Ruth. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I'm honored to take part in this great conference at this moment for social economy all over the world, in Europe as well. So concerning your question, the underlying reasoning behind the creation of Portugal social innovation. Well, we know, as we all know, since the beginning of the century, civil society initiatives and entrepreneurial projects have escalated around the world, and to successfully address the very high, complex and interdependent social and environmental problems that we face in our time, it's crucial to develop strong and meaningful partnerships between the public, the private and the social sector. And that was really the main underlying reasoning behind the creation of Portugal social innovation back in 2014. On one hand, the recognition that the public sector, the government, would never have enough resources or competencies to deal effectively with all social problems. And on the other hand, the notion that social entrepreneurship could actually be an effective answer to come up with new solutions, as the impact investment movement was already growing all over the world at a fast pace. So with these things in mind, the Portuguese government created Portugal Social Innovation, which is actually a groundbreaking public policy program that mobilized around 150 million euros of the European Social Fund in this programming period, with two main objectives. First, to promote social innovation and social entrepreneurship, which means to finance social innovation projects. Second, to develop the social investment market, which is to say, to persuade investors to join this movement. So these were the main objectives and underlying reasoning behind the creation of this pioneering program of public policy for social innovation in Portugal using the European Social Fund.
That's very interesting. But in practice, how did it work? In particular, interested to understand how in practice you supported the development of the social investment market. I mean that social innovation market. That I'm quite interested. So
yes, to achieve these objectives, we've created with this budget from the European Social Fund, we've created 4 financing instruments with 2 basic assumptions. First, each of these 4 instruments is oriented to a specific stage of development of a social innovation project, addressing specific needs and the specific potential of different projects in different levels of maturity. So this is the first assumption. The second assumption to create these instruments was that all of them assume the development of partnerships between the social entrepreneur and the social organization and the investor. So with these 2 basic assumptions in mind, we've created 4 instruments, and I can go briefly over each of them. One sentence. We have first, for an early stage of development of these projects, we have a capacity building program for developing management competencies in the teams that are involved in social innovation projects. Then we have, second instrument, a match fund that leverages philanthropy to finance the growth of the social innovation projects. A third instrument, which is a social impact bonds program, which is an outcome payment instrument for contracting and paying for measurable social outcomes aligned with public policy priorities. And finally, we have a financial instrument, which is also pioneer with the European Social Fund in this kind of design. It's a financial instrument that has 2 streams. On one hand, it provides guarantees for loans. On the other hand, it co-invests directly in SMEs alongside with private investors. So we have these 4 solutions that address different needs and different levels of maturity of the projects in the ecosystem. Just to give you some figures, to this date, we have approved 581 projects so far all over the country, which means around 110 million euros. That includes 35 million euros of social investment. Of these 110 million euros, around 92 million euros were specifically directed to social economy organizations that represent a little over 90% of all the beneficiaries of this program so far. So we're working with more than 650 investors, more than 420 social organizations. And among the investors, we have corporations, we have investment funds, but we have 142 municipalities as well. We have public and private organizations that agreed to join this movement and co-finance and be involved in the development of these projects. And the involvement of municipalities is very important because it's an extra assurance that these projects, these experimental projects, are linked to the specific problems of the territory. So that's how we did it so far.
That sounds very impressive. Do you think this is sustainable? I mean, moving on to a new program, or I mean, will you still continue to support, or how do you see the development, let's say?
Yes, the first projects that we approved were in June 2017. It took a lot of time to build these instruments. And back in these last 4 years have been incredible. Well, all over the world, in Europe, and especially in Portugal, we have a very dynamic ecosystem now with a lot of entrepreneurs, social organizations involved. As I said, municipalities, investors getting a little every day, getting more interested in this agenda. So I think we have all the conditions to move along. And the European Social Fund was absolutely fundamental to create the conditions to experiment this idea, because Portugal social innovation is itself a public policy prototyping experience. So, and we are just in the first stage. I think, yes, we have all the conditions in the ecosystem to develop this agenda. I think, and now with these competence centers, we have the extra possibility of creating a network that goes outside our borders and share this experience and bringing projects and ideas into our national ecosystem and export some of those that we are financing so far. So I think we have I'm quite optimistic concerning the future, and we need this civil society movement to help us to develop new and better solutions to build back better, as we all say today.
Well, okay, everything positive, or do you want to perhaps do you have some
Yes.
lessons that you want to share with us on what not to do?
well yes, I can share some of the don'ts, but I would prefer to tell you the do's, because there were lessons learned along the way.
Yes.
I would say, just for starters, if you allow me, I would like to highlight some of the key success factors of this program that highlight what allowed us to come to this point. Well, I would say from the point of view of the conditions to operate, I would highlight 3 success factors. First, political support at the center of the government. This is a public governmental initiative, and it's important to have political support. And we worked a few years with the Ministry of the Presidency, now the Ministry of Planning. And so this political support is important because social innovation touches different areas of the government. So it's important to have that political support.
Do I understand you rightly? Not necessarily only political support of the Minister of Employment, but it's actually at the present across government.
Yes, because we have projects for education, for employment, for social protection, justice, health as well. So social innovation touches different areas. It's important to have this political support. Then the second factor is the fact that we have the European Social Fund available to allow us for this experience. With no European support, it couldn't. I don't think we could experiment this public policy in Portugal. And third, the fact that we have a mission unit, a public mission unit. Portugal Social Innovation is a mission unit that centralizes the responsibility for implementing and coordinating the public policy for social innovation. We are managing the funding, but we also already has a competence center for the ecosystem and became the main catalyzer for the whole ecosystem. Luckily, in Portugal, as a dimension, small country, that allow us to have this kind of experimental public policy and can bring all the country in just one time.
So it is managed.
So I think it's important.
Sorry to interrupt you. No, it's managed at central level, actually, not at regional level.
No, actually, this is a mission unit that centralizes the coordination, but for us to achieve these goals, we've created inside the Portugal Social Innovation structure what we call an activation team of regional representatives that are spread all over the country, that work daily with entrepreneurs, with social organizations, with municipalities, with investors, that make bridges among them and help them to transform their good ideas into good projects that then can apply to our calls. So we are actually working very closely with social organizations on the ground and trying to understand what's happening. So it's managed centrally, but with from the operation point of view, we are very close to the organizations. And that is, for me, definitely a key success factor to achieve these numbers. We would never have these numbers if we were not working very closely in the territories across the country. And that is a very another thing. It's important we develop the strategic partnerships and alliances with key players in the ecosystem: foundations, investors, municipalities, social entrepreneurs associations, social entrepreneurial associations, public entities, and I think universities. So I think it's important to be on the ground and make these kind of partnerships with key players so we can move forward and adjust what we are doing to the real needs and the potential that we have on the ground. And the fact that we have different financing instruments also is a key success factor, because we don't have a one-size-fits-all instrument. We have different solutions for different levels of maturity that actually address different needs and put the ecosystem to work. So we have small entrepreneurs that have a solution, and we have major organizations that have big solutions. They all have financing solutions. Not perfect. We've been adjusting some things, but that's a success factors.
So how do you see the future moving forward?
Well, I would say that concerning lessons learned and looking at the future, we learned back in 2014 we didn't know if that would be the case, but now we know that there is a high creative and entrepreneurial potential in civil society and social organizations, social economy organizations, that must be unleashed and harnessed to improve the way we live, to effectively fight inequalities, and very important to us, inspire the evolution of public policies as well. And that is something that we didn't do effectively yet, but I think that something in the future must be done. The linkage between these experiences in the ground and the public policies, how public policies in different areas can actually improve concerning these experiences that we are financing in the ground from these social organizations and social entrepreneurs experiences. So I think it's one thing that must be addressed in the future, and one question that we must ask to understand the real impact of social innovation, how public policies have evolved. I think that blended finance also works. That's something that we've learned. Blended finance, and when I'm talking about blended finance, I'm talking about bringing together public and private funding to jointly develop these experimental projects. One of the lessons learned is that social innovation is more effective and sustainable if it emerges from partnerships between the private, the public, and the social sector. That's definitely a lesson learned. We also learned that more traditional organizations can be quite innovative if they have the right incentives as well. A large part of the organizations that are developing social innovation projects in Portugal are traditional organizations that provide traditional services. And we also learn that not all innovation has to be disruptive. There is a high value on incremental innovation. And these more traditional organizations are developing solutions to improve the services they already provide to the community. That is quite interesting as well. And I think it's important, as I said, to be close to the ground, listen to what they have to say, and adjust our instruments and our solutions to the needs in order to make these solutions more effective. I can even provide you with some examples of projects that we are financing if we have time and if you are interested, because that's inspirational to understand what you're doing.
I would be very interesting, yes.
Okay.
But perhaps, shall I try and see if there are some questions from the ground first?
Okay.
I see already there's one question online about the digital social innovation. And that, of course, would also be covered. I mean, we are looking, everything is digital now, so I think there is no issue of trying, to separate it.
But in Portugal, we've created, in the social impact bonds program, it's an outcome payment instrument for 6 different areas of public policy. And the classical ones: employment, social protection, education, health, justice, and then we add the digital inclusion area. And we already have in Portugal social impact bonds in digital inclusion specifically because of this instrument. So we try to direct innovation towards that solutions as well.
Thank you. Can I open the floor for if there are any questions from the floor? Anyone who wants to intervene? I'm not sure how you're supposed to do this, actually. No? Okay, then I will ask Filipe to give us a couple of examples of successful projects, because I think it's useful to see more in practice what we're talking about.
Yes, we have. Well, let's see. From top of my mind, we have the Code Academy, which is an intensive capacity building program for developing personal and technical skills in programming. We have the 55 in employment. We have the 55 Plus project, which is in Lisbon, Porto, and other cities in Portugal, very successful, which is an online platform that brings together those over 55 years old that have some skills and time to provide small services to their communities, and those in the community that need those services. We have the SPEAK program, maybe the most international Portuguese social entrepreneurship program, which is a social inclusion solution for migrants and foreigners that uses the sharing of and teaching of linguistic knowledge between migrants and local communities to promote their social and cultural integration. We have the spot games that are gamifying the teaching of mathematics and Portuguese with success in some schools in Portugal. Or we have the SAPIE. SAPIE is a very innovative educational tool that uses artificial intelligence to prevent early school dropouts. So we have a lot of different approaches, digital based, not digital, and very interesting in different areas. I don't know if you have questions now.
There are some questions in the chat coming up. I think the question I interpret that the question from Carolina is for me. So in the meantime, you can read the question from Matteo and Emma, which I think are for you.
I don't, okay.
So the program, I'm assuming you mean the European programs, but maybe if I'm wrong, correct me. So the answer would be yes, I guess. I mean, everything depends on how. First of all, we are looking at different instruments that the Commission will for which we will do call for proposals or call for tenders, and some of them, and so it depends, but certainly it depends on the projects and what you are proposing, basically. But in principle, yes, is the answer for Caroline. On whether the program is also open for entrepreneurs whose clients are social entrepreneurs. Filipe.
Yes, I've read the question from Matteo. And he asks, who does provide the initial capital for the social impact bonds you mentioned before? Well, in the Portuguese case, we have foundations, we have banks, we have consultants. We are in the, actually, it was not a success, social impact bonds program as we planned in Portugal. And mainly because we stood halfway of creating a really innovative instrument. Why? Because it doesn't, with our actual design, we are not actually paying for results. The result, the outcome, is a requirement for reimbursing real expenses, invoice by invoice. And that's something that is not adjusted to the spirit of this kind of instrument. So that's something that we have to improve in the future. And the investors are not willing to invest in a project and have no real prediction how much they will get back, because they will have to present invoice by invoice. And that's something that's a real burden, a bureaucratic burden that is not adjusted to these instruments. But that's it. Some banks, some foundations, and some inclusive private corporations in the education area as well. And then Emma is saying that she agrees that innovation doesn't have to be always disruptive. That's something that we learn. We started this program only for disruptive innovation, and then we learned that we should also finance incremental innovation in organizations that already provide social services, because our focus is not, actually, this is something strange, but our focus is not in the solution itself, is in the problem. So if we focus on the problem and we see that there is here a proposal that addresses the problem and improves the life of those kind of people with that vulnerability, that's something that we should address, independently of being completely disruptive or incremental, especially in those that already provide social services. And we also learned in this journey that we should not only finance projects that we deal with end user, with the most vulnerable citizens, but also finance projects that could multiply the possibility of these solutions. So we are financing what we call social incubators or social innovation incubators. We already have 21 across the country that are these structures that provide capacity building for social entrepreneurs, for social organizations, and help them to develop their own projects locally. So that's something that we learn along the way. And that's, I think it's very strategic and important to do, not finance only projects, but local structures to help these organizations and local ecosystems to develop these solutions.
Thank you, Filipe. I think I have another question, which is more for me. So I leave you the time to read the other questions, which are again also for you, concerning the role of public policy and perhaps also how to explain that projects are socially innovative. As far as to take the point from Nicolas, whether there are criteria about the co-financing from ESF Plus on the basis of evaluation of social innovation. So I go back to what I mentioned at the beginning. We have various instruments that we're looking at. So as far as the smaller, very small part of the overall Social Fund Plus, which is financed at the EU level, and where we will have calls for proposal on social innovation, of course, these are not out yet, but eventually when there will be a criteria about whether, one of the evaluation criteria will be the social innovativeness, if you want to call it like that. As far as the co-financing of projects in the ESF Plus, as I mentioned, when there are projects, there is not a specific percentage a member states have to spend on social innovation, but there is an incentive because social innovative projects, as recognized by member states, can be co-financed up to a level of 95%. So I think that covers your question. Perhaps back to you, Filipe.
Okay, Ivana is asked to talk a little bit about how the criteria for evaluating a project. Well, actually, when we receive an application, and we receive more than 1,000 so far, we always look at three main, we ask three main questions. First, is there a clear socially vulnerable group that is being addressed in this project? That is something important because we have good social innovation ideas that don't address a specific vulnerability. So is there a clear group with a shared vulnerability among them? First question. Second, how is this different? How is this solution different from what the public services already provide or what the market already provides? And that's something that the project has to defend itself in the application. It has to demonstrate that what they're doing is different from the current solutions. That's something that we evaluate ourselves. And then the third question, is the solution capable or has it the potential to improve the quality of life or the perspectives of self-development of this vulnerable group that was identified? So these are the three main questions, and we come up to these three questions after a long series of questions that we were creating by analyzing all these accessing these applications. So that's something that we learn from the ecosystem of social innovation, which are the questions that we must do in order to make these projects eligible for being assessed from the merit of the application. This is not, these are not the questions that make these applications eligible for funding, but they pass the first phase, and then we are going to analyze the application after these questions are answered. So, but that's it. But all these projects, we look at all of them has been experimental projects. So we don't care about the scale or the location. Depending, of course, they have to be in the region, but it's important to be, it doesn't matter if it's a project that works with 10 people or with 1,000 people, because they are experimental. They are experimenting new solutions to that problem. And we are not and we do not demand for these projects to be economically sustainable, because we have a principle that if the focus is on the problem, not all social problems can be addressed with profitable projects and economically sustainable projects. Some of these solutions must be helped with philanthropic aid and service from the, and aid from the public sector as well. So I think that's it. We have a very open criteria to address these applications and these projects when they knock on our door.
I will.
Is there more?
Well, there's a question from Clara, which is, I guess, for both of us. So, Clara Moder, could you elaborate on the role of public policy? Should the main task of policymakers to create infrastructure for social innovation, or should public policy itself also initiate social innovation? If I can start if you wish.
Yes,
of course, it's very, I don't think we should exclude a priori that public policy cannot provide social innovation. I mean, the point is that when it's public policy that does social innovation directly, you don't necessarily call it social innovation. I mean, I think it's a bit linked to what we talked about, traditional operators being able to be more innovative and to come up with new solutions. So, of course, when it is coming directly from the public level, then it becomes officially policy. Let's call it that way. You see, it's not. So what we are now talking about is indeed to create infrastructure so that grassroots social innovation can be developed, can flourish, and eventually possibly even mainstreamed in social policy, I mean in public policy directive. But of course, if there is innovation already at the level of public policy, which happens, I mean, it's not that it doesn't happen, it happens a lot, tant mieux. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That would be my answer. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No,
Filipe.
That would be my answer as well. As I said, this Portugal social innovation experience was interesting to develop these experiences on the ground with social entrepreneurs, social organizations, but we didn't reach yet the next level. But actually, we were working very closely with some ministries, and the Ministry of Labor is quite interested in understanding what have we experienced so far with these organizations that can inspire the evolution of public policies. I think that's the next step. But yes, I think I would say that the public policy has to create the infrastructure for civil society and social organizations to develop their own solutions and in partnership. But it's important to promote this close partnership between public policy and this experimentation. That's something that we need to invest on, because we have that solution in the social impact bonds program. All the applications must be done in partnerships between the service provider, the investor, and the public entity that is responsible for the implementation of public policy in that area. And this public entity has no skin in the game. We are, with European Social Fund, financing this instrument, but bringing them together in this partnership is a way of persuading them to start shifting from an output-focused orientation to a more outcome-based policy. That's something that it's very important to develop capacity building programs in this area inside public administration. That's something that we didn't do so far, something that we need to do in the near future as well.
Thank you very much, Filipe. I think it's time to move on, to leave the floor to our to the other speakers. And in that, really was very interesting. I think we all appreciated that. And there is one question from Fotini, which I think fits better in the next session. So we leave it for them. And thank you. I leave the floor to my colleague Risto Raivio, who is going to focus on the issue of the National Competence Center, together with Norbert.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And when we move to the question of national competence centers, we are actually looking very much at the issues that were already touched upon in the previous discussion and dialogue about all this kind of support that is provided to build an ecosystem where the ESF Plus goes beyond providing money and supports the stakeholders to take an active role in social innovation. So within the exercise of national competence centers, we are actually currently in the beginning of a very exciting 2 years project period. Last year, we published a call for proposal for building national competence centers for social innovation in the member states. And so the nature of this exercise is that we were calling for stakeholders from the member states to work jointly in an international, transnational project, learning from each other and creating together models and solutions for competence centers for social innovation, which then will be implemented nationally in every country. And the aim of the exercise is that from this transnational mutual learning, you build capacities and you design models that will then lead to more conducive social innovation ecosystem in the countries, including also what we call community-led local development as a way of doing and implementing also projects within the ESF. And so this call was published last summer, and now we are in the beginning of implementation period. If we move to the next slide, we have there the kind of key functions that we expect that these competence centers, once they have been developed and established, they will fulfill. And the first one is the capacity building, capacity of all the stakeholders that are in the picture. The previous dialogue already referred to the need of building the capacities both on the side of, for example, the ESF managing authorities, but also the practitioners, which includes, of course, social economy organizations, social enterprises, and other social economy organizations, local regional authorities, and the support organizations in the field. And it all starts, of course, by clarifying the concept, what is social innovation and what it entails to promote and work towards social innovations. There is also the question of networking and finding synergies between the work of different organizations, pulling them together, but also synergies regarding different EU funding schemes and programs. These competence centers, we expect them to be really a kind of focal points in the future to help everybody, all kind of organizations, to make best use of EU funding opportunities. We know that from social economy side, there is a request for this kind of one-stop shops for EU funding, and we expect that the national competence centers for social innovation, they will to a certain extent respond to that kind of request too. And finally, there is this transnational dimension also, transfer of knowledge between the countries. While we are talking about national competence centers, we expect them to be also internationally connected and helping also stakeholders to connect with their peers in other countries. So these three functions, we hope, will really be on the agenda of the competence centers in the future. So if we move to the next slide, we will see actually what we have as a result of the call. We have selected 6 projects, sounds very little, but they actually cover 25 countries, which means 24 EU member states, plus UK, which was still eligible for this call because this money comes from the period when UK was still a member of the European Union. And in these 25 countries, the figure of the number of involved organizations is actually much bigger. We have 48 organizations involved, and you see with the color codes here the big diversity of organizations involved. And the diversity is there also in terms of projects being very different. You can see some of them having 5 or 9 organizations involved, and the biggest one has 54, and that refers to the situation starting point in the countries is very diverse. In some countries in this project, the first thing will be to really map the situation in the country, identify the relevant organizations, and then down the road get them involved. As in some other countries, the situation is clear, you know, big number of relevant organizations, and you have a lot of them already involved. There was a question about whether these competence centers will be published on the website of the European Union or whether they are already there. Now, as I explained here, we are in a process where countries and organizations from the countries are working in establishing the competence centers. But information about these projects and about the organizations that are involved will soon be published on the ESF Plus website with contact details also. We hope at least to provide a clear contact point for every country. You probably have already counted and understood that there are 3 countries who are not formally involved in building these competence centers now. They are Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Malta, but they have also already joined in the mutual learning exercise in terms of sharing their experience and learning from what is actually shared and developed between the countries, between the organizations in this exercise. And we hope that they will join the train in that way, that also competence centers for social innovation will emerge in those 3 countries too. And let's go still one step further also in next slide. Indeed, within the 2 years period that these projects are now implementing, they have all started now in May this year. We expect that as an end result, we will have a competence center for social innovation in each country. And in each country, there will also be a kind of analysis of the situation, about the strength and weaknesses and sources of inspiration in the country. And that can be shared with other countries and other organizations. There will be a blueprint and a strategy and action plan how to go about this competence center in the country. The concept as such is very flexible. You can have 1 organization, you can have 5, or you can have 15 who network and pull together their expertise, jointly becoming a competence center. But important is that whatever model is designed and implemented in the country is that it is created jointly with the relevant organizations, and it enjoys a kind of recognition and credibility and ownership by the relevant stakeholders in the country. And finally, also very concretely, a kind of collection of initiatives that have been started or replicated in the country, again, not only for the information of the country itself, but also to be shared and compared with other countries. And finally, each of the consortium, the 6 projects, each of them are expected also to do an exercise of replication or scaling up 1 or 2 social innovation projects or concepts within the consortium. So that is not pro-country, but pro-project. And from here, I would like to move now to look at one of the cases more concretely, one of those 6, and I hope Norbert will join. Yes, Norbert is there. So Norbert Kunz is from the social impact called organization in Germany. And his organization is leading one of the 6 projects, a consortium where in addition to Germany, there is Denmark, Poland, Estonia, and UK. And Norbert, you have a very long experience in supporting social innovation in Germany and across other countries. And based on your experience, how do you assess actually an added value of this kind of competence centers being created?
Hello, Risto. Hello to everyone. Thank you for the invitation for the session. Yes, I really believe that the establishment of national competence centers take us several steps forward in promoting social innovation in the European countries. On the one hand side, the establishment of national competence centers upgrades the importance of the topic. We had in the last 10 years, we had a lot of problems to explain the term of social innovation and to convince decision makers why social innovation is so important. On the other hand, the semi-public nature of the national competence centers upgrades the reputation of participating organizations. Until now, it was often claimed that we are only representing particular interests of ourselves or a few organizations. Now we will act on the behalf of the European Union. I think that will be a change for a lot of organizations who are dealing with social innovation in Germany and other countries. I think it will be much easier to get access to decision makers in politics, administration, and also business. It will certainly become easier to cooperate with ESF authorities. And of course, we hope that we can influence future funding decisions in favor of the development of social innovation, and also to initiate partnerships between private and public institutions. On the other hand, we can now also systematically gather, evaluate information, experience, and know-how, as well as hold special events to further development of social innovation ecosystem. Until now, there was no support in Germany, or probably in some other countries as well, for this, and had to be mastered on the top of this organization without any funding. In Germany, we have succeeded in strategically bundling many activities through the establishment of the Social Entrepreneurship Network. And I think with a National Competence Center, we will deepen this process.
Right. Actually, then going into the situation in Germany, it's a big country with a lot of organizations. You have a very decentralized structure in the country also. How do you actually plan to gain the kind of critical mass in terms of becoming relevant and recognized in the whole country? As I referred earlier, it's important part of the concept here that the competence center is then recognized by the stakeholders, the whole range of stakeholders. So how are you going to go about that in Germany?
Really, that's a good question specifically for Germany. Yes, and that's also a major challenge for us. I think for people from outside have to understand we have 16 federal states in Germany. We have 16 federal governments, and some of these are very different with very different constellations. And then we have the national government. That means that we have 17 ESF authorities in Germany and 17 different funding strategies. That's not easy. So, in contrast to Portugal, neither the federal nor the state government have used ESF funding to develop social innovation in the current funding period. The whole ecosystem in Germany is built on private activities, in cooperation with foundations, with CSR departments, with private organizations, but we didn't get any public funding. So politicians in Germany have only been aware of the issue for 2 or 3 years. It has also been very, very difficult for us to identify which ministries are responsible for this topic in Germany. One time I got the answer in one of our ministries when I talked about social innovation, and he told me our research ministry is responsible for innovation. So that's maybe a case. We have had many discussions and have had a lot of patience in order to be heard by members of the parliament, by political parties and ministries, and to raise awareness of this issue. The development of the ecosystem in Germany, like I mentioned before, was funded by foundations and company. And this organization support us also in the future. We have really strong connection to foundations and to CSR departments and big companies. So Also, we have also been helped by best practices in the last 10 years. For example, the social impact, or we have set up more than 500 social enterprises with a workforce of more than 5,000 people. So that's best practice. So we have also our startups. We had 3 startups in Germany from our social impact labs who won the German Founders Award, which is the biggest award on entrepreneurship in Germany. So we have been able to demonstrate in various studies how great the added value to the society is through the development of social innovations, and how social follow-up costs could be reduced as a result. And I think for us, it was a really big step forward that when we created the Social Entrepreneurship Network in Germany. So the bundling of our interest to this network, which now has 700 member organizations, has helped us to here. Last year, in the German Parliament, the German Bundestag, with the votes of the governing parties, called on the German government to step up measures to promote social innovation. Since this time, the ministry also have started to set up corresponding measures, and we also know from the federal states that the topic will gain in importance in preparation of the new funding period. I think we must stay on top of this and to increase the pressure. It is important to build a broad alliance, especially between the welfare sector and the social entrepreneurship sector. The welfare sector in Germany is very, very important. Also, we have to build up cooperations with universities and the private economy. Our National Competence Center in Germany is made up of a broad consortium of different organizations. Many organizations in our consortium have been working in this field for a long time, more than 10 years. We have a wide range of experience and contacts in politics, in business, in administration, and also in civil society. I think we will use this potential to drive the issue forward in Germany. So I'm hopeful that we will get much more influence on the topic on social innovation in the next years through the National Competence Center.
It's very good that you believe in what you are doing. And here you see, I referred in my introduction to the transnational dimension of this project. It's a transnational now in the process when you are building the competence centers, but also our understanding on the Commission side is that the transnational cooperation will stay on the agenda of the national competence centers. And we are also, as it was mentioned in the slide that Ruth was showing, we will also try to build a European level competence center, which will be a connection point to the national competence center. So how important this transnational dimension is for you conceptually and in practice, and in concrete terms there, what do you actually expect to learn from UK, Denmark, Poland and Estonia, or from one of them, if you want to be precise?
Yeah, I'm really a friend of transnational corporations. We are dealing with transnational corporations since almost 20 years. We started with the first equal phase in 2002, I think. So that's 20 years ago. And since this time, we are working on transnational partnerships. And all the time, it was that for our work in Germany, it has a very, very high impact to have transnational partnerships. We learned a lot. We shared experiences. We shared methodology. We learned what have worked in other countries and what have not worked in other countries, what kind of strategies they used, and what partnerships they built up. And so we overtook this experiences from other countries in our own work and had a really, really big benefit. So and all our partners we have in Germany have a long time of experience in transnational partnership. So we are all friends of transnational partnership. If you look to our transnational consortium now with UK, Denmark, Estonia and Poland, we can see on the one hand side, in Germany, like I mentioned before, we have not really experience with public funding on this field, because that was not of the interest of our ESF authorities to spend fundings into the projects with a term or with an aim on social innovation, because there was not really good understanding. But it's different, for example, to United Kingdom. It started almost 10 years ago with Cameron, with Big Society. They built up the social capital fund in UK. They have a much more experience to deal together with public organizations on this field. There are still a lot of barriers also in UK, but they have much more experience in this cooperation between the government and social enterprise and social enterprise sector. So they have also developed a lot of projects, like I mentioned before, the social impact bonds, the social capital. So that are all tools and projects where we can learn from. So if I look into the other direction, so we have specifically Estonia and Denmark. In Estonia, they realized the topic of social innovation maybe in the last 2 years. It comes more from top-down process, because like you can see also in our partnership, the ministry is very deeply involved, and in Estonia, the idea to promote social innovation is a part of the general strategy of the country. It's a part of the growth strategy of the country, but also a part to develop new projects and ideas in rural areas, to promote or to support people in rural areas, or to develop new projects for rural areas, and so on. And in Denmark, there's almost no ecosystem for social innovation. We have 2 actors who are really interested to build up an ecosystem to have better connection to the public organization, to the government, and to promote the topic social innovation in Denmark, because that's almost no discussion in Denmark about social innovation, about social entrepreneurship, and so on.
Except amongst some academics.
Except some academics. And in Poland, the structure, they have a long time of experience on social enterprise and social entrepreneurship, but the sector is not connected with each other. There's no connection. There's no lobby for social entrepreneurship in the country. They have some very, very good projects, and they have some links to the ministries, but there's no general strategy to promote social entrepreneurship. And so one idea of in Poland is to build up a network. So maybe our social entrepreneurship network in Germany could be something like a model also for Poland, how to create a strong social entrepreneurship network in Poland. So that's so we can, and specifically because of your idea on the call that more developed countries should help also less developed country in this field. I think it could be very, very good benefit specifically for Estonia and for Denmark, also for Poland, but for all of us to build up a strong partnership in different thematic fields.
Thank you, Norbert. This sounds very interesting. I think with your project and with the 5 other projects, we will have very exciting 2 years coming, and it will be very interesting to see the results. And we hope that these competence centers will really respond to the expectations. I think we have high expectations now for good reasons. And so good luck for the implementation. And I think now it's time to move on the agenda. Give back to Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it is. I wanted just to, as before, to ask Laura Mangeng to present the database.
morning, everybody. Indeed, the European Commission is working on the creation of a social innovation database, which aims at promoting the scaling up and replication of social innovations throughout Europe. Some of you may remember that the ESF Equal Community Initiative had a centralized project database with innovative transnational projects, which was very much appreciated by all stakeholders. And the forthcoming new database builds on this experience, but uses today's technological features. And through this database, interested organizations will be able to showcase their social innovation examples for inspiration of others, such as public authorities facing social challenges. They will be able to search for innovative solutions and approaches developed and tested in other countries. They will, importantly, be able to get in touch with organizations which have uploaded projects, and also search for potential partners for European calls for transnational projects, for instance, which the ESF Plus will launch, as we heard. The database will be hosted on the Europa portal under the ESF Plus website. And from the beginning, it will include at least 100 examples on social innovation and social experimentation across the EU. And this is just a start, because the database will be continuously updated with further examples. And managing authorities and project promoters will be able to propose case studies, which will be made visible in the database. I would like to show you how the prototype looks like, if I manage to share the slides. No, not really. Not really, but okay, it's quite user-friendly, and most importantly, it has a searching and matching functionality, which enables users to quickly find relevant case studies and suitable partner organizations. And I was giving it a last chance. Okay, no, it's not working. And yes, each case study will have the same structure. It presents the problem addressed, the innovative solution, the key results and benefits, the potential for transferability, and also the contact details of the organization. And currently we are finalizing some technical aspects of the database, but we are expecting to get it online just after the summer break this year. And however, you can already have a look at some of the cases which will be included in the database, because the Commission published a brochure which includes 27 cases included in the database, one from each member state. And I wanted to show you the cover of the brochure, but I'll put a link in the chat. And to give you a taste of which type of projects the database will showcase, I would just like to mention one example, which is called Create Responsible from Slovenia. The problem which the project addresses is the working conditions of people working in the creative sector in Slovenia. And these include, for instance, job insecurity and considerable variation of income over time, as most of them are freelancers. And one of the solutions adopted in recent years in some EU countries is the creation of a cooperative to support freelancers. And building on this experience, the Create Responsible created the first e-cooperative in Slovenia, using a digital platform to connect and support freelancers, part-time workers, and also the unemployed, particularly those working in the creative sector. And the platform publishes job offers, organizes networking occasions, provides online mentoring, information on freelancing, and it also guarantees access to training for freelancers to expand their skill set and knowledge base. And the database will provide further information on the project, which was co-financed by the European Social Fund, its key results and its potential for transferability. And this example and many other inspiring examples are included in the brochure. And I will. It is in the media library here, and I will also post a link on the chat. And yes, I hope this presentation has given you an overview on the social innovation database. And I now give back the floor to Ruth for some concluding remarks. Thank you.
Hello.
Remarks. I would like to give there on a further questions to any of the speakers, and I remind that there was actually a question that was not replied to concerning the transnational cooperation by Fontini. So perhaps I leave the floor to Risto for this one, and if in the meantime anyone else has other further questions, feel free.
Yes, thank you, Ruth. In the slide that Ruth was presenting in the beginning, where there were many boxes, in the middle part of that picture, there was this kind of space for transnational piloting and testing and developing the social innovations. And we have indeed, within the ESF Plus, a specific allocation of resources. We say 197 million euros in current prices. Current prices means inflation-corrected prices, which is dedicated to help transnational cooperation between countries for this purpose, piloting and supporting replication and scaling of social innovation. And this will be implemented in that way that we will actually endorse, how do we call it actually? But anyway, we will delegate the implementation of this action to one of the managing authorities who will then implement that Europe-wide. And so very soon there will be a call for expression of interest, and we hope that we will find an interested managing authority who engages in this kind of Europe-wide implementation. A similar structure and implementation system has been implemented on the side of Regional Development Fund for urban innovative actions in the past. So if you know that, that would be a reference point of how it will work. There is, of course, another element in transnational cooperation also, that the ESF regulation specifically says that member states, when they use the ESF funding, they can also support transnational cooperation. So in addition to this specifically earmarked money that will be implemented at EU level, member states might support and co-finance transnational cooperation projects too. Now there was a question whether it could be combined with Interreg and so on. There I'm afraid my technical level about the kind of multi-fund issues is not enough. I cannot answer to that. But of course social innovation is an issue that is relevant also in the context of regional development. And in context of Interreg, we have seen many very interesting, many very relevant social innovation projects. And if we go back to the presentation that I made about these competence centers, the one of the 6 projects which is coordinated by the Austrian partner, it involves actually countries around the Danube region, and they have background in working together on social innovation in the context of Interreg. So synergies between the different funds will for sure also be there in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Risto, and thank you, Carolina, for putting the link to the brochure. But just to be clear on the question of Caroline, the brochure is a brochure of 20 good examples of social innovations that were financed in the past. It is not the brochure, the database. The database is a different link, and that is perhaps another link that we should put in.
You know, we don't have it yet. Okay. So the database is currently in the hands of our IT colleagues, but it will be integrated in the ESF Plus website. So that will be the place for the database, and we hope in September we will have it there.
Thank you very much for the specification. So, but also to be clear that what you have there is the link to the brochure, both times the same link, actually. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else who wants to intervene or comments or experience or questions? Okay, if not, then I will just conclude this session. Thank you very much for all the questions and for the participation. We are now, of course, preparing all the things that we mentioned, and also the member states are preparing. They're working on putting together their programs for the ESF Plus in the future, and we are, of course, also discussing with the member states what they plan to do on social innovation. So that's for the big chunk of the money, let's say, for the ESF. At the same time, the National Competence Center projects are starting their activity gradually on the ground, and hopefully they will also, I mean, we really hope that there will be, in a way, game changers in the member states by supporting and connecting the whole spectrum of social innovation stakeholders at the national level. And we hope that this will allow you also to be connected and learn more what is happening in your countries, and also to be more involved in the relevant activities. Now, the transnational cooperation that Risto just mentioned is only going to start next year, and there again it will be a further step to be able to learn from each other beyond the national level. So this is there are lots of things, there are lots of steps from that we are trying to put together, from really the grassroots finance at local level to developing ideas at European level, to finding a way for piloting them, experimenting, and cross-border fertilization. So we hope that this will be useful for all of us at local, regional, national, and European level to go forward with social innovation. Thank you very much for your participation, and have a good lunch break, I guess. Thank you. Bye-bye.